I'll open the meeting and welcome those present in attendance and advise that the meeting will be recorded in accordance with the council policy titled Electronic Recording of Council Meeting Policy of Meetings of Council to assist in the preparation of minutes and ensure a true and accurate account of debate and discussion at the meetings is available. We'll now be upstanding for prayers. Prayers tonight will be by Matthew Fisher, and we'll say the Lord's Prayer after. Thanks.
All right, let's pray. Lord, I thank you so much for tonight that we all get to gather here together in this room. And I pray, Lord, that as discussions ahead, Lord, that we would be able to make great decisions, Lord, and that you would give us wisdom on knowing how to serve the people of this community as well as we can. And I thank you so much for every person that's in this room. I pray, Father, that there would just be a real peace that just rests upon this meeting. I ask this in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen. And we're going to say the Lord's Prayer now together. And so if you'd like to say it together, we'll do that. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen.
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 Thanks, Matthew. Attendance, we have Betty, who's got a leave of absence, so we haven't any apologies. We now have the minutes, and somebody prepared to move that the minutes of the meeting in August is approved. Thanks, Councillor Oldacre. Seconded.
Yes.
Councillor Blizzard. Is there any queries on the minutes? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Issues raised by councillors, 3-1-0, 3-2, we have 3 there, and you've got responses to them. 3-3, councillor questions without notice. Are there any questions without notice? No. Councillor Oldacre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question was raised in the workshop. The street lighting around the place, particularly going over the bridge over the duck here, there's no lighting at all on that. Has anybody had any discussions with those networks about fixing up some of the street lighting? Some are working, some are not. And it's pretty ordinary.
I don't know. Darryl will probably need to bring it to the next meeting, will we? Or?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Our facilities manager, who looks after street lighting, is looking into street lighting around town. There's been a couple of requests of darker than normal areas as well that he's looking at. So we'll come back with a response as soon as he's done a bit of assessment and consult with those areas.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Wood.
Sorry, it was a little bit quick for me on the question and response. Can I go back to that, please?
Oh, yes, yep.
Okay. And thank you for the response on that. But I was just wondering, in my question on that, I asked whether there would be a sign put up at the Mella turn-off to encourage heavier trucks to go through there. Was there anything on that sign to go on further or not?
I'd have to go to state growth if I was going to do it, but
Yeah, exactly right. We've discussed it with the engineering team. You would have seen a social media post recently in regard to heavy vehicle bypassing town. But general heavy vehicles, as much as we can't restrict them coming through town, we're still discussing what a sign would look like if we put one up to ensure that it doesn't create the wrong effect for people and confusion around town, I guess. Yeah, so we'll come back with a further response.
Thanks for that.
Are there any further questions without notice? If not, we'll go on to declaration of pecuniary interests. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interests? None. We go on to 5, 6 and 7. We need that recommendation. We do each meeting. Is somebody prepared to move that? Thanks, Councillor Ritland, second Deputy Mayor. I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried. We go on to the council workshops. We had 2 of those. Is there any queries on any of those?
Mayor, this is the background discussion as well as the agenda.
Getting further on it? No. You're on the mayor's one or the workshops?
Mayor's appointment, 24th of the
Oh,
8th.
okay, yeah. I was trying to work out where you got it from. Yeah, the one at the rec ground was talking about drainage and issues like that, and so I know Darren's going to do something for the next budget with that, as I understand it.
That's correct.
Because some of the drainage isn't working as good as it used to, and so we may need to do some more work on the drainage, but we need to have a budgeted item for it because it'll be reasonably expensive, and we will look at that next year. And I think the other one was the credit nets. We did talk about that, as I understand they were going to be fixed up to make it better than, and probably some more work that's going to be next year.
To go through you, Mr Mayor, yes, there'll be a line item in the next year's budget to increase the capacity of the cricket nets with some infield netting and a bit more redesign around that. But we have done some temporary works to fill the holes that we have in our community. So.
Thank you. Anything else on appointments?
The regional jobs hub for 27.
Yeah, we had a discussion on that with, who was it? Crown Coast, that's right. And that was the one with the Crown Coast, but it was only a general discussion, but we had nothing more than that at this stage. Just trying to think what else did we discuss in your something that day? I'm just trying to think what we did discuss on. We might have to give an answer.
Through Mr Mayor, I can follow up the notes in terms of, I know we talked about regional land use strategy as well,
Yes.
As part of that. But it was, in terms of that discussion, it was primarily around making sure that our facilities are actually linked and recognised or what's, being funded or proposed up in Burn.
Pretty sure that was the one where we talked about all areas, with our strategy for settlement strategy, and we wanted to make sure that we exactly had some involvement in that because we've been talking about it for a fair while. The governments have talked about doing some work with it as well. Because there was a fair bit of difference. I mean, Bernie has apparently got a lot of people unemployed, and we've got people here that are actually looking for people, which I think we're all aware of. And so, and I know we talked about things like transport and how to get them down here and those type of things as well. And obviously, we want people to actually live here to the possible. Not everybody's going to want to come and take the kids out of school and live here and do whatever. As we said to them, that was our number one that we would like, but they're going to travel and then probably trying to make it so that they can actually get down here because getting down here is difficult for some of these people.
No, it'd be great to have some clarification just around regional jobs
Yes.
hubs, a new term,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the fact that it's taking place on Cradle Coast is a new conversation. So jobs hub
I know,
Burnie and jobs Tasmania, and there's lots of different ones flying around. So it'd be good to have clarification. Thank you.
and what was the income of it as well, so we can actually know what we talked about as outcomes for sure. Anything else? If not, we'll move to no later agenda items, no petitions. Now down to public questions. The council encourages community participation by providing opportunity for public questions on activities of council. Councillors and staff strive to ensure all people are treated with courtesy, fairness, dignity and respect, and we ask members of the public to apply similar standards in dealing with council. As a chairperson of the meeting, it is my responsibility to judge if a question or statement is out of order due to use of offensive, objectionable and defamatory expressions. I intend to provide people with the opportunity to ask 2 questions each, and if time permits, may allow more. Please provide your name and contact details and a summary of your question on the forms provided, so that if we need to contact you, we can. If you have a question, please can you come to the microphone, which is just behind Stubbard, and state your name and ask your question. Are there any questions? We have got a question.
Hello. For those that know, my name's Rodney Smith and I work in agriculture and I'm a full-time job. The question I have, and I'm certainly hopeful, but I don't know who to address it to, but I'm hopeful the expertise that's in this room can actually address it to the right people. First question is, I'm concerned that we've welcomed a lot of different nationalities into our town in recent times, but I'm very concerned of their road usage, the amount of damage that's sustained to their personal vehicles that they drive, and the amount of those vehicles that are off the road on a very regular basis around our community. Now, in the industry that I come from, I see this as an opportunity to avoid a near miss, which there's no doubt in my opinion that we'll end up in some form of serious road fatality if we don't actually do something. Now, we've welcomed these people. We've probably missed a few steps on what else we need to do to help them. So who you address that with for the future, but I'd certainly ask that you address it with the appropriate people that you have contact with. And I'll leave that with you for question 1. Question 2, it appears to be in the community a large increasing number of what appears to be unregistered vehicles left on the side of the public street between the road and the private boundary. The grass has grown over them, they've got the wheels pulled off them, they're not going anywhere. It certainly looks, untidy in our community, and I just asked the question as to who's responsible for that, and are we going to do anything about removing them if they are unregistered, and who is responsible for that? Thank you.
Well, the first question is, yeah, we had discussed that only a month or so ago, and we're going to go and talk to the sergeant about that and see whether we can see what we can actually do, whether it's lessons that we need to be trying to teach them or whatever we need to do, but we are going to have a discussion with that. Your second question, with the vehicles that's left on the side of the road, yeah, we've done some work on that as well, and there's a process that you have to go through, which takes some time, but it's more a police matter, but we can't touch any cars, as I understand, and Darren will correct me if I'm wrong, until the police has given us the okay to do anything with them. And so we can't, as soon as we find out that there's an abandoned car, we can't just go and pick it up and take it to the tip or do whatever else we want to do. There is a process. But, have I missed anything on that, Darren?
No, that's correct. The right course of action is to notify the police, and then the police will issue council with a letter of intent to remove the car, and then council will make the arrangements through our compliance team.
to have the car removed.
So can I ask who has to notify the police?
Any customer can, so anyone in the community.
Anybody in the public?
Right, well, my question would be, the police are active in our community, over the whole community. The question I've got there is, why aren't the police doing something about the unregistered vehicles on the road when they drive past them?
We could talk to the police about it, and so when we do catch up with them, our list is probably a little bit longer than what it first was.
Good job, thank you.
Thanks, Roddy. But it is a problem, I totally agree. Any further questions? No further questions? Move right along. We have one public question that was received in writing, and later on in the agenda is an answer to that. Notice of the motion, 9.1. Councillor Raposki had a notice of motion, which I think he wants to lift from the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the motion was raised at the last meeting, and it was put in procedural motion for further discussion at our workshop. Now's the time we've had those discussions to bring it back to the table. So I'd like to raise my motion again.
So you want to move that?
Move that, thank you.
Got a second for that?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Harris? Vice Harris?
Yeah, well, the motion at the time was...
We just got to move, I've just got to put that motion now, and then we can deal with the motion. Yes, we've got to lift it for a start before we can discuss it. So put the motion, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against, carried? Now, we've lifted it from the floor, so we
We can speak on the motion. The motion at the time was that the council reached a vote of no confidence in the state government for its decision to close tracks 501, 3 and 601 with the Arthur Pond Conservation Area south of Sandy Cape. I raise that motion on behalf of the community. The community have become very angry with how the government's treated the community.
We need to have a motion so that we can discuss it.
The motion is as per the original motion. I have to move an amendment. I'm speaking on the motion I raised, so that's the motion we've got to say.
Okay.
Have you?
Yeah, sort of.
I just want to read it, just go back to where we were with that and why the motion was there. And I asked the seconder if I can amend that motion in a moment. So it was raised on behalf of the community because the community's been angry with the government. The government made commitments at their state election, 2 state elections, and we've been locked out of that area. We, the community, have been locked out of the area for over 7 years. We put our trust in the government, but we feel as though, and the community feel as though they've been left down. But due to the wise council visit, that we got put into a procedural motion, and we have had discussions through the last couple of weeks. So I'd like to move an amendment, if I can, to that motion if the seconder agrees to it.
Thank you. And I understand the general manager's going to read it out.
Well, that was going to be my request because it's quite long, and I'd like it read out, the full amendment, so that it goes online so people can hear it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The amended motion, I will read. It's got a little bit of length in it, so I trust everybody bears with me. That the first part is that Circular Head Council register compelling vote of no confidence in the APCA Values Assessment Report recommendation to retain closure of tracks 501, 503 and 601 within the Arthur Pond Conservation Area south of Sandy Cape due to a systemic failure of the report to respect and action, no local community input and consultation for solutions to the continued local community and visitor use of the area. B, lack of open public reference to the publicly appointed Arthur Pond Conservation Area Advisory Management Committee for guidance on alternative solutions and community input. C, misrepresentations with inaccurate and irrelevant assessment material. D, any consideration for the whole of community's social and economic well-being. E, any declaration of the author's perceived conflicts of interest and biases. F, significant local and strong local intergenerational connection with place. The second part of the motion reads, Circular Head Council calls upon the Tasmanian Premier, Minister for Parks and all Braddon parliamentary members to action a formal written response within 6 months to address the systemic failures of the APCA Values Assessment Report with respect to A, no local community input and consultation for solutions to the continued local community and visitor use of the area. B, lack of open public reference to the publicly appointed Arthur Pyman Conservation Area Advisory Management Committee for guidance on alternative solutions and community input. C, misrepresentations with inaccurate and irrelevant assessment material. D, any consideration for the whole of Circular Head and the greater northwest Tasmanian community, social and economic well-being. Ignoring significant local knowledge and strong intergenerational connection with place. And F, taking actions to implement formal sanctioning for all the APCA Values Assessment Report commissioning and preparation supervisors of the project who failed to ensure that the project brief and the report preparation contain clear independency from biases of information, wide-ranging informed community consultation and feedback, and did not contain false misrepresentations of fact, inclusions of irrelevant or inaccurate assessment material, and the reporting during development of the publication. Part C reads, Circular Head Council calls on the Premier and the Federal Minister for Braddon to enact the following outcomes at the state and federal levels of government to secure the positive community-wide ongoing use and activation of the Arthur Pyman Conservation Area, APCA, and its West Coast four-wheel drive tracks, encompassing the following items within 6 months of this resolution date. 1. Implement an immediate public statement in support of and to confirm the local Circular Head Aboriginal Corporation to be formally acknowledged as the rightful local representatives of the First Nations Aboriginal voice in the community of Circular Head. 2. Immediately undertake an independent review of the APCA Values Assessment Report to identify and implement recommendations for alternative access solutions with a key focus on community engagement and empowerment of the local community stakeholders. 3. Empower and fund the Federal Minister to commission works for a review of the presented APCA Values Assessment Report and to identify alternative workable solutions to reshape and adapt access tracks to allow reopen to community access to the full length of the coastline between Sandy Cape and the Pyman River. Confirm in writing with an open public letter to the Circular Head community and Circular Head Council, no additional public lands will be activated for further exclusion of the broad-based community use or exclusive ownership to groups outside the local Circular Head community who do not have a strong intergenerational connection with place. 5. Confirm all future decisions regarding the APCA and its West Coast four-wheel drive tracks will not be to the exclusion of local community engagement, participation, and the reference to the Circular Head Council and the Aboriginal community of Circular Head as the rightful First Nations Aboriginal voice for the area. 6. Immediately empower and fund Circular Head Aboriginal Corporation to activate and implement steps to commence supervised trial period of access to all areas of the relic sites, I'll read that again. Immediately empower and fund Circular Head Aboriginal Corporation to activate and implement steps to commence a supervised trial period of access to all areas of the APCA between Arthur River and the Pyman River with respect to all known cultural relic sites. This access is to demonstrate and understand the importance of all cultural values and promote the untapped opportunity of sustainable APCA cultural tourism, ecotourism, led by the Circular Head community with the local First Nations Aboriginal people. 7, confirm written support for the APCA Management Committee to oversee all funding allocated towards the improvement of area services and forward drive access to the Arthur Pyman Conservation Area and its West Coast forward drive tracks. 8, confirm immediate written support for the development of a detailed APCA and West Coast forward drive coast track strategy, providing new track solutions to provide ongoing and expanded forward drive access to the area between Arthur River and the Pyman River. 9, fund the immediate commencement of a development application being prepared and developed in consultation with the Circular Head Aboriginal Corporation and the wider Circular Head community for lodgement and assessment with Circular Head Council, with all necessary ecological and cultural heritage studies to design and construct alternative access arrangements to provide recreational forward drive access between Sandy Cape and the Pyman River, being completed within 6 months. Upon receipt of the development approval for the new forward drive access tracks, works are to commence within 3 months of the development approval date and to be complete no later than February 2023. All infrastructure construction works is to be jointly funded between the state and federal governments to bring forward the development of expanded ecotourism and community access to this important local intergenerational recreational area. Part 4, Circular Head Council will refer this resolution and the referenced actions to the Arthur Pyman Conservation Area Advisory Management Committee to seek the committee's support for the outcomes contained within.
Thanks very much, General Manager, for reading that up. It's quite long and probably quite emotional for me to read all that. But I thank the councillors for taking my original motion to the procedural and sitting down and working our way forward with actions and timeframes and hopefully commitments from the state government. So I hope you all support the workings that we've been through in the last 2 weeks.
Councillor Riley. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm going to totally support this motion, but point 3 of the last, Mr Chair, I know I'm not the greatest speller, never was when I went to school, which was a long time ago, but the word minister is spelled incorrectly.
I corrected that in my copy, sir.
It's not corrected on this one, so I just corrected for your attention. I think this is a sensible outcome for all involved, and I'll call on the council to support it. It was at the Western Area Management the other night, there was a view taken. Councillor Harris was there, and he'll correct me if I'm wrong, but they said that they wanted to see it all be available for all cultures right throughout the time as it has been up to now, and they don't want to be cut off. Words similar to that, if that's clear. So I call on the council to fully support this amendment, and let's move it forward.
Mr Mayor, thank you, and I'd like to speak similar to Councillor Polsky and thank all council staff along with councillors and sitting down and working through such a long process. You've seen Councillor Polsky and myself being generational people in that area and how much it means to us and many others in this community. So with that, thank you, and particularly Mr Jan, thank you for all your advice and support. So call on the council to support.
Thank you. Councillor Wizard.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yes, I'll certainly be supporting, and I acknowledge, what was the wording? The honest, robust and strong debate that we did have around the table about it, and we've come up with something that has the potential to be a turning point in not just this, but in a lot of things within our area. There's a potential to move forward as a fully integrated, fully grouped together community moving forward in everything we do if these actions come about. So I'll certainly be supporting it, and I thank Councillor Poposky and Councillor Isaac for holding their motion.
Are there any further speakers for or against? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried unanimously.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Councillors, our audio is not working tonight, so we're not live streaming tonight. And that speaks for you, mate.
We are recording, but we're not going live, so.
We'll stream it later.
You've been ahead. Yeah, no, I got ahead of it. We're now up to so we're going to act as a planning authority now, so I just remind councillors that we are now operating as a planning authority to keep everybody in consideration. The first one is 8 Coburn Lane, Smith, and so I'll ask Ashley to speak to it. Thank you.
Here or there? Or probably best there. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First application we have before us is for a dwelling on 8 Coburn Lane. It's an application for a residential use being a dwelling in the agricultural zone. Assessment of the application demonstrated it does not comply with multiple clauses of the planning scheme. The main concern is its proximity to a dairy farm adjacent to the north and potential for land use conflict. If I can refer the councillors to the two figures, figure 1 and figure 2 in the report. There's an aerial photograph and then a site plan included within the report. It shows proximity of the site with relation to the dairy farm to the north. You can see the hump and hollow there. There's also a drain running along the northern boundary of the site between the farm and the proposed dwelling. The dwelling is 14 metres from this boundary and therefore from this drain, which from a recent site inspection has demonstrated is half full of effluent. Therefore there's quite a bit of smell in close proximity to where the residence is proposed. So there is not potential for land use conflict, it currently exists. There is an agricultural report which was supplemented or supplied with the application. The ag report relies upon a vegetation buffer along the northern boundary to minimise impacts from spray and noise. This buffer does not exist, and even if it did, it would not suppress the odour that would impact the site from the dairy farm to the north. The report states that if the farmer wished to irrigate or spray in this adjoining paddock, they would need to advise the resident prior. This is an unreasonable impost of a farming operation in the agricultural zone. Through the application process, it was discussed with the applicant potential to relocate the dwelling to the southwest corner in order to increase separation from agricultural use and also closer proximity to existing residences. But the applicant chose to proceed with the plans as submitted. So in summary, the proposal does not comply with various aspects of the planning scheme, is unable to be supported by council staff and is therefore recommended for refusal.
Thanks, Ashley. Are we prepared to move the recommendation?
Mr Mayor, I rise to move a recommendation, but not the one, no.
that is proposed. And with your indulgence and all the conditions, not only want to read through this whole program, as the general manager wants to read through them, but in the planning authority's opinion, upon the consideration of this application, the proposal does comply with the planning scheme and is and moving this recommendation for approval. It is recommended in accordance with section 51 and 57, the land use planning and central infant planning scheme. The permit be granted for the construction of a dwelling on 8 Coburn Road in Smithton, subject to the following conditions and notes.
I don't know that we need to read the conditions and notes because all councillors have got a copy
Thank you.
of that. Is somebody prepared to second that motion? That's Councillor Redland. Is anyone wish to speak to it here? Councillor Riley?
Mr Mayor, this is a block of ground, all the ground south of it is all got houses on it, and the former planning scheme used to call it a rural residential. This block was part of that original development. How it's got left out has just been rural, it was beyond me, and we've had some plenty of discussions with the general manager prior to tonight over a number of weeks to try and get this rectified. And that's the reason for ringing, because if we hadn't had this alternative, we would have had to move a procedural motion and seek extension of time from the proponents. I give the general manager the heads up, that's what I would have done. And so consequently we came up with this alternative motion. I call on the council to support it. Simply because if you was to go against it, like if it was to be declined, it goes completely against the strategies of getting more people into the community, village strategies, the whole box of dice. It just flies in the face of your refusal. And that's the reason, and I'm quite passionate, because it doesn't affect the area at all. Plenty of other people throughout the community live alongside dairy farms, and therefore, you know, if we're going forward and we're going to increase our population, we've got to have somewhere for them to live. And that's the reason for wanting to pass this now, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any further speakers?
Just taking into consideration the history of how those zones came about, and also I realise that our planner works within the planning scheme for the rules, but I'm pleased that we've been able to find an alternative, given mostly around the agricultural use, and that the report actually said it won't, consultant report said that it won't change much around the agricultural use of that block. And I think that sometimes our state planning scheme doesn't take into context our local use of that agricultural area and the nuances that we have as a local area in how we deal with agricultural neighbouring properties, but also the use of a block of that size. So given the other residential in the area, the history of that and the agricultural use, so whether it's in the southwest corner or in another corner, I don't feel that the agricultural use there gets changed very much. So that would be my reasoning.
Thank you. Any further speakers? For or against? Nobody spoke against it, so I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Aye. Against? It's carried. We now move on to 10.2. That's special.
Yep, we've got an application for a subdivision of the Creek shop from a residence that's already on the same property, so essentially splitting it in two, so separating the shop from the residence. By and large, it does comply with the scheme, but the scheme does have a absolute minimum lot size of 8,000 square metres in that zone. This property is already starting below that minimum, therefore council staff are unable to support the proposal and therefore have to put forward a refusal motion on this one.
Thank you. Somebody want to remove that recommendation?
No, Mr Mayor, I'm not going to move the recommendation that's before us, and I thank the planner for the people, the work that they do to try and to come to terms with some of this, and I know that a lot of things are in black and white, and they don't always better for Collingwood, but but some of these people that are in the south that make some of these rules, you know, sometimes you have to question. On this occasion, I'm going to move procedure. The motion this time is that we agree to split the shop and the residence off, because the boundaries are there. We're not altering any boundaries as such. We allow homes to be cut off and farms get sold on quarter-acre blocks, as the planner said. It didn't quite, because it's only because of the size that it doesn't quite comply with the planning scheme. But in reality, the same thing applies. If we're going to have these village strategies, we want people to come and live in the community, then we need to be able to have this house cut off or the shop cut off. If somebody wants to sell it, and they never bother do that. And therefore, I call on the council to support the recommendation.
Thank you. Is Governor Smith, Councillor? Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Any further speakers, for or against?
I just want to speak for the motion that John put forward. In regard to the location, it's in a village area. I know that's not quite how we see it as far as the planning side, but as far as we see it in the whole picture, it is in a village area and in a built-up area. In retrospect, we've got farms around, but there's a lot of houses around that area, and that's why I'm supporting it. I just think it's two buildings on one title that should be separated. So that's why I'm supporting it.
Thank you. Any further speakers? That's right.
I think that's really important as we go forward with lots of different uses, that we need to apply consistency, absolutely, but where we can to include the flexibility, and so without setting precedents for other changes, I think that flexibility is important while still applying consistency.
Thank you. Any further speakers? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We're now going into 11.1, which is the vehicle charging station.
What's the next item?
11.1.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Council some years ago were approached by the Electric Vehicle Association and gave a couple of different presentations to council about electric vehicles and around how they see the future and the need to have charging stations throughout the state as part of that. At those first times, grant applications were put in but were unsuccessful. The Tasmanian government had opened another grant round to fund electric vehicle charging stations, and the Electric Vehicle Association, which now have a company or an offshoot company, Electric Highway Tasmania, have identified Smithton as one of those priority sites that they would like to see a fast charging station installed, and approached council with the idea of a proposal where council would partner with them in providing some land, which would involve a rent-free period of occupation, because it's unlikely that there will be any economic viability of this charging station in the initial years, but provide some land to help stimulate provision of a charging station here, so that as people take up the technology, that Smithton can be a destination for people to come and use electric vehicles. And so that site that was identified was close to the centre of town, so in the car park at King Street, where the former public toilets used to be, which were demolished about 10 years ago, on a grassed area that's currently not really used for anything at the moment. So the idea behind that was that as people charge their vehicle on a fast charge station, it takes around 90 minutes to get a full charge, which gives you around 500 kilometres range. That whilst they're waiting for the vehicle to be charged, they can go to the public toilets, they can go down the shop and get a coffee or do a bit of shopping in the time that they are waiting for their vehicle to charge. So that's why our location in the centre of town is thought to be very attractive. So the recommendation before council is that council would partner with the Electric Highway Tasmania, seen as a way of providing this service in Circular Head without council having to devote its time and energy and gain expertise in how you design these things by partnering with someone who's already doing it. Electric Highway Tasmania do have stations in Burnie, is the nearest one they have. That's the nearest fast charge station. So with that bit of background, there's the recommendations there that the council would endorse them going for a grant application. And if the grant application is successful, the council would provide an in-kind contribution, which would be 5 years free rental and in-kind support to the installation to the value of $3,000, and authorise the General Manager to negotiate lease arrangements and also to undertake the process for public land and leasing public land. So with that, Mr Mayor, present for Council's consideration.
Thank you. We'll wait for you to sit down before
Move
and second. Councillor Woodward.
Yeah, I certainly support the recommendation that's before us. Yeah, I believe that.
Councillor Blizzard is going to second.
I'll say good ground, I'll say we can ground.
Yeah, I certainly support it, and I believe it's a very positive move that's before us. In our Crater Coast area, there's charging stations in Devonport, Burnie, Queenstown, and also in Morbana. And there's 340 vehicles that are in Tasmania at the moment. I read just recently in 2020, there was 20,000 electric vehicles that were sold in Australia, plus there would be more now. So I believe this would be very positive. There would be more people once we open up. There'll be more people coming across in electric vehicles. Now, I mean, if they come to, they get to Morbana, okay, they charge there. Where do they go there? They come to Smithton. If we've got our fast charging station there, they can charge up and they can do a lot of touring around our area. So I believe it's a common sense thing to happen in our area. And if we don't, we'll be left behind. And we don't want to be left behind. We want to be moving forward. So I certainly support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Blizzard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I'm happy to second the motion. It's obviously electric cars will grow and grow and grow. There's no doubt in the world about that. It's equally as obvious it's going to be a period of time before something like this becomes a profitable venture. But by the time we wait for business to actually pick up whether they're going to make a quid out of it, we may well have missed the bus. So that's the reason I'm going to support it. I think it would be great to be in there up the front, and in due course they'll start paying their way down the track. So I'm happy to support the motion or the resolution.
Councillor
Mr Mayor, thank you. I'd like to speak against the recommendations. As Councillor Woodward mentioned, that there is only 340 cars, electric cars in Tasmania, but I won't discount this as part of the broader conversation for our CBD growth in Smithton. I think over the next 5 to 10 years, there'll be many opportunities for further grants and further funding opportunities for electric charging stations. For that reason, Mr Mayor, I will be speaking against it.
Yeah, I actually will be voting for it. My reasons are, I know that it's not really a perfect situation. There's still a lot of technology being developed. We're still not sure on which plug. We're still talking about the speeds. We're still talking about what the person does while they're sitting for 90 minutes in between. There's still a lot of discussions about that, but our strategy is to, we're working towards the Western Explorer and trying to get that sealed. And one thing that Tasmania has is a fleet that can be changed like that very quickly, as we've seen when they didn't have enough to fill the hire cars. So for those reasons and the push with tourism, I agree, we may not have it right this time, but I think that there's learnings from it, and for 3,000, there may be ones in the future, we might not get it exactly right this time, but I think that we should learn from it and move forward with the change in environment.
Any further speakers? Or against Councillor Koski?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I've expressed that I believe we need electric charging station. I find it difficult to accept the placement of the electric charging for two reasons. One is we haven't had it put in our plan for the CBD. And I don't like the concept of putting big community developments without an overall plan. We got an absolute shocking development plan given to us some years ago that's sitting on the shelf somewhere that will never be opened. And this is new technology, but we need a new development plan for the CBD. And I hear what Councillor Epplin just said, that what do they do for 90 minutes? The ideal location would have been at our visitor centre, our heritage centre, that anybody could spend 90 minutes in our heritage centre and enjoy our history. And for that reason, I think I won't be supporting the motion, the recommendation.
Any further speakers? Or against? If not, do you want to sum it up, Councillor William?
No, Mr Mayor, I think I've pretty well covered to what I wanted to say, but a little bit only on Councillor Koski's charging time. His preference will be out of the yeah, I mean, that's only a hop, skip and a jump. Someone who's been travelling down here could walk out there. Thank you.
Where our footpaths out on the road. I just remind you, do need to get 5 because it has to be a absolute majority, or we need 5 to pass the million, which is fine. So I'll put the recommendation, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Still against, which is okay, but that is carried. Councillor White, Sarah, Councillor Koski is against. Thanks, councillors. We'll have some discussion, actually. 11.2.
I'll make sure the mover doesn't get out of the pool tomorrow. That's okay.
Well, somebody go vote.
You can't threaten people like that.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to propose a council consideration of the board as a budget amendment to install a couple of solar lights in the Nelson Street car park. Since the adoption of the budget and annual plan in July, we've had a recommendation and request from community to come forward around the safety aspects of a car park that has no lighting. So the report for council's consideration is to install 2 solar panel light fixtures in the car park for the sum of $15,000. And the funding for that will be after completion of a review of our annual plan and budget estimates. We've identified a potential surplus through revised market pricing for our reseal program, bridge replacement program and bridge deck replacements, which will cover the cost of the $15,000 to achieve the outcome we want for the community. So I propose that to council with the recommendation that they go forward, but again for consideration of council.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver.
Don't think them
I rise to support the recommendation.
You wish to second it, will you, Councillor?
Yes, I would like to speak on that.
You can, sir.
Thank you. I believe it's a good project that has come forward, and I believe it's another common sense project. It's been a very, very bad area over in that car park, and quite a few people have come to me over the last 12 months and concerned about how bad it's been, especially workers finishing work of an evening, going across, it's very dark, very unsafe, and putting lights there is a great move. And it's not only workers, we've got the youth area there, 7 and there's a lot of activity there, so I believe putting lights there will be a good thing for our public. Thank you.
Any further speakers for events? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. 11.3, Brook Street.
Again, the purpose of this report is for to propose a budget amendment for some curb and channel repair works that were outside of the original scope when the budget was adopted on Brook and Bug Street. We've undertaken and commenced works with the excavation of the hot mix surface of the footpaths, and some of the areas on Brook Street are not coping well with the stress of the excavation, I'll put it that way. So what we've noticed is the construction of the curb and channel isn't holding up to those works. So what we propose there is to again use some surplus funding out of the review of the annual plan and budget estimates, identified, as mentioned before, for our reseal program, bridge replacement and bridge protect replacement. What that will equate to is the budget amendment we're looking for is $167,000. The total of the surplus funding at this point in time through the August review was $152,000. So we're seeking from council a $15,000 contribution to fund the remaining works outside of those estimates. So I propose that to council for consideration so that we can actually continue on with the works to provide the right outcome for community in that area.
Thank you. Somebody prepared to move the recommendation?
So move, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Redland, seconded.
He's not
in the
In 3 weeks he'll be up there.
Any discussion?
I just wanted to make a comment that it's one of those things that happens when you start excavation, you don't realise what's underneath and what's happening, so we've just got to fix it. Got to get it right, so it's no good half doing the job.
Just question, when do we determine the footpath should be on both sides of the street and when there's on one side? Is that sufficient, or is it just a common practice to put it on both sides of the street?
I couldn't do that.
What do you do with John Wyndham?
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, our service level indicates that in the urban area, a footpath will be on one side of the street. In a lot of locations around Smithton in the urban area, it's on both sides of the street. So we'd have to refer to the service level document, and it would be up to council if a proposed change was to take place. There could be an amendment to the service level document that was adopted, I think it was 2 years ago.
We want to come down.
Yeah.
We workshopped it.
So it'll be 2 years ago now.
I asked the question and we were approval for the budget alteration, but that area is getting on a little bit down in that original subdivision, and therefore there may be quite a bit of work going forward that would cost. And I'm just asking for consideration whether it will be a double-sided footpath or a single side might be sufficient in the area, but I would imagine a high density area probably needs it on both sides. So it's just querying what our policy was really.
Yep. Happy to take that forward. We could probably do it in the next 9 months of this year, but the following year have a budget, a council workshop to discuss that and probably review the appetite for council to look at the footpath service levels again.
Yeah, I would imagine the density of population would play a big part.
Yes.
Thank you. Any further speakers? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. 11.4, request to waive the covenant, the setback requirements, Scottsdale Road, Mills, Crossroads.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We've got a recommendation here that council commit to not enforce covenant number 1 on registered title SP 143227 and write to affected landowners to advise them of this decision. In the last couple of months, we've had a development application submitted to the council for a shed on a property in the vicinity, Ravita Drive, and through the process of assessing that, it was determined that there was a covenant over the property for a 30-metre setback from Scotchtown Road. The proposal was for a 20-metre setback to the road. So the landowner approached council and asked if council would be enforcing the covenant or not. We've then done some research into the covenant, why it was proposed in the first instance. So going back, there was a subdivision that was approved through a tribunal hearing, and a condition was included in that decision that a covenant be placed on the titles for a 30-metre setback due to likelihood of amenity issues as it were, those roads were unsealed at the time, therefore potential dust, and that's why the greater setbacks to dwellings. Those roads are now sealed, therefore dust is not an issue to be concerned about. Therefore, it is recommended that council not enforce that covenant as the amenity issue for the reason that it was included on titles is now there anymore.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Blizzard. Councillor Ryan, a second. Any discussion required?
No. I just feel it's a common sense removal of the covenant, especially in the southern suburb of Scottsdale, the Eckland area, and nice new houses. You read your tunes.
Any further discussion after that? I think I'll go straight and put the recommendation. All those in favour? Aye. Against, carried. 11.5, Cradle Coast Regional Cat Management Strategy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Cradle Coast Cat Management Strategy has been released, and there's Cradle Coast Authority is seeking support and endorsement from the councils with regards to the cat management strategy. I know that it was topical, it's in the Today's Advocate as well, recorded this process. So there are two recommendations there that the report be received by council and endorse the Cradle Coast Regional Cat Management Strategy. The second one that makes it clear that council's involvement under the Cradle Coast Regional Cat Management Strategy be linked to education, promotion and advocacy, and therefore not compelling council to supply any resources or funding in order to engage that strategy. So that was an additional recommendation from the standard recommendation that was released by the Cradle Coast Authority, just to clarify council's involvement in the delivery of the strategy.
Thank you. Is somebody prepared to move the recommendation? Thank you. Is somebody prepared? Thanks. Councillor Harris. Any discussion required?
I just want to say, Mr Mayor, that I'm glad that second point's in there because we don't want to have any implications on the background of us apart from education and promotion and advocacy. So I think that's very well done put that in there.
Any further discussion? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. I wonder if Community Small Grants Scheme 2021-22.
I might hand over to Tracy for the community small grant. I don't want to steal his thunder.
Through you, Mr Mayor, for Council's consideration, the Community Small Grants program. There, just by way of background, so there were 11 applications received. Some of those weren't eligible. There were 8 that were eligible for funding. They were considered by the grants group or committee, and then came and were discussed at a workshop around those grants. The total amount of grant funding recommended is $17,398.90. The total cost of the projects being supported is just under $26,000. So a good investment in terms of activity in the community. I do think that one of the things about the programs and the things that are being, the activities that are being supported, is they will impact far more broadly than just the small amount of funds that are being administered. So they are for clubs and organisations that will reach far out into the community. They touch on some of the issues like things such as mental health that we know that we want to have a positive impact on. And they showed really good partnerships and doing things that will be really recognisable in the community. And I think that that's what your grants program is about a small investment by council that allows community to get on and do really great things. So I commend the report to you.
Thank you, Councillor Albright.
I'd like to move the recommendations that are before. There are plenty of discussions about it, and I want the council to support it.
Thank you. Someone second it?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Thanks, Councillor Butler.
Good.
Is any discussion? Any question, any discussion? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Well, financial management. Financial report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to present the financial report for the month of August 2021. Council received 1 application for the first homeowners grant for the month, giving a total of 8 for the year so far. There's been no extraordinary expenditure for the month of August, and Council continues to track the budget for the 2 months of the financial year to date. One point of interest is that the rates collection, some collected basically 10% more at this point than last year, so this means that some of our ratepayers have been able to access the discount, which they weren't last year for different reasons, so it's probably a positive outlook, that one.
Thank you. So we prepared to move the recommendation?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Ivasaris. Councillor Albright. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, just a point, I really thank Diamond for that percentage of the additional ratepayers that are paid to get the 3% off. Just thought whether it's open for discussion over the next 9 months to talk about a strategy going forward as we're getting 3% less as such from a percentage value, what we're doing with that money, whether there's a way of, I suppose, looking at investing some way to at least reassure our ratepayer that we're looking to create a return for them.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, we have dropped our discount percentage as interest rates for our investments have dropped as well. We are in the process of updating our investment strategy to allow us to review other investment options, and we'll do that over the next period up until December.
Through you, I've done Duncan. I made a note of this in my committee. Department of State Road, 429,000. Is that a one-off? Is that a one-off grant?
Yeah, it is. That's been Mr. Mayor. It's a grant that was put through as in June. but we've got to meet some particular requirements before they'll pay that money. So we're just doing that work at the moment, having that grant awarded.
So, if I may, where would that money be spent once it comes through?
Through Mr. Mayor, it's probably already been spent, and it's a grant that will, it's a grant that'll go. Grant that'll go to fund projects that we've already put through.
Yeah. Some of that are revenue spare cash there. But most of those grants are tied to specific projects.
Yep.
It's not a grant to get to the need. Please sell that.
No, I thought it was worth finding out.
Any further discussion required? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. 12.2, Senior Manager Report.
Mr. Mayor, for Council's consideration, the report includes some advice around community small grants, which you've just concluded, which is a positive outcome, and there'll be many community organisations listening tonight or duly waiting for their letter of endorsement. The 2021 Circular Head Science gig went off very, very well, but the current activity in the community at this moment during the month is the Charts Festival. You'll see there some information in relation to a number of the public art exhibitions that are occurring. Fabulous outcomes, and dare I say, a well-engaged community around a number of those activities. There was even one group touting the benefits of Sounds Around Sounds during the week that I was in a meeting, and I did plant the seed for them to think about why we only got to do that in September. There's a number of youth activities reported there, particularly in relation to the chill activities of the focus group. 7-Up's running well, but the tale of the tourism states and lockdowns around COVID, it's very evident in the visitors into the Stanley Visitor Centre. For the graph for August, you'll notice that Tasmanians are those that are holding up the statistics. Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland are very low based upon exclusions into the state. In relation to the information bulletin, there's a number of letters and pieces of correspondence that have come through. One I would draw your attention to is some letters there in relation to a request for a master plan in relation to Stanley. No doubt there'll be further community engagement in Stanley, as recently been discussed around Kings Park and other projects there where we're receiving community feedback. I present the report for Council's consideration.
Thank you. You will move that? Councillor Redmond, I will ask a question. Yeah, thank you. Second, Deputy Mayor, any discussion?
Yeah, I'd just like to just have a comment on livability, if I may, with that report. Firstly, I'd just like to draw your attention to the community. It's often at council we get positive and negative feedback, sometimes a lot of negative, but I'd really like to pass on some positive comments. If you look at the small grant scheme, the science gig, the Charts Festival, the youth, chill, the focus group, the 7-Up, all of that on top of the workforce development plan. I'd just like to say that for a really small team, juggling other things, they have just done an amazing job in the last month. And the next month is going to be demanding of their time in a similar way, but it's not often that we say thank you to say one over another, but I'd just like to point out that livability is one of our focuses going forward, how important that is to us as a community, and just what a great job they've done with those events. So I just wanted to make a comment on that.
Councillor Pascal.
I'll just bring Councillor Beckman down to earth a little bit. Because I read in the press this week that we have lost a $25 million investment due to anti-social media comments and no social licence. It's very disappointing, and I'm referring probably to the letter that we received in the information centre. And if there's a way around reigniting that project, I hope that we're successful and don't lose communications with the developer.
Thank you. I agree. Anything else, councillors?
I'd hate for that to detract from my previous comments.
Well, what you haven't actually.
Well, most things I say is not relevant.
I think what you said is relevant.
Yeah, I think what Councillor Ross is relevant, but it wasn't relevant to what Councillor Lee said. Mr Mayor, I've noticed this letter of resignation, advising the resignation of the CEO of Taswater. Have we had any feedback about the concerns that's been raised at this table about Taswater and the shenanigans?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I did notice there was an email late into my email box today, but I haven't had a chance to open that. So as soon as I get to that tomorrow, I'll circulate the advice that we've been provided with.
Anything further?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'm sort of reading our GM's report, and I think I'm in the right section, but there's 275,000 funding for local infrastructure. Is that a one-off grant, Mr GM?
That's the one for West Coast and Circular Head.
Yes, yep.
Okay.
That's for a plan, I'm assuming.
Sorry?
It's not for infrastructure, it's for a plan.
Right.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's the West by Northwest project plan that's currently being worked on. There's a online discussion this Monday in relation to the projects that they're bringing forward. My understanding is they're going to bring forward 5 or 6 projects, and then they're going to financially road test one of those ideas as the next big attraction for the Northwest. So that'll fall somewhere between the West Coast and ourselves in terms of a project to bring forward higher visitation numbers to the region.
That was the one that David Inches was doing.
That's correct.
Someone Current and another gentleman.
I received an email earlier today with the link for the discussions on Monday. Yeah, so as soon as I know more, I'll bring that forward to the council.
Anything further, councillors? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Aye. Against, carried. And now we move to 13, which is minutes of committees. And there are 3 there. Is somebody prepared to move that?
Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Iosaris. Second. Deputy Mayor. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against, carried. 13.1 is Circular Head Community Road Safety Partnership Program. You've got the minutes here of 9 reports. Are there any questions on that one?
Good to see they fixed the problem with the Crouch Creek bus stop, Mr Mayor.
Yes.
I wanted to just ask about the learner driver mentor program. Does anybody know what the bottleneck there is? There's apparently a really long waiting list. Does anyone know if that's cars, volunteers or something else? Is it?
I'm pretty sure I could certainly take that on notice, Mr Mayor, but, and clarify with Sonia, but I'm pretty sure it's volunteers. The reason for that.
So I wouldn't know. I know that some people have got to wait for a long time before putting in for a licence to be able to look in because there's a waiting list. I'm not sure how long it is now, but it has been in months.
It could be, yeah. So I just wonder if, when we're talking workforce, if that's an issue that we could somehow look into, and if we need to look, if our volunteers are going to become very scarce in the future, if we need to look to resource that in a different way.
So has that been talked about much in the committee, Councillor Ross?
A little bit, Mr Mayor, but it hasn't really been at the forefront of a lot of discussion. It has been an issue for some time, I would say since I joined the committee. But yes, certainly we'll follow up on your report tomorrow to at least initiate something, because I think Councillor Edmund raised a very valid point. If we're trying to, for a workforce development plan, well, certainly part of the conversation.
If you can find something out and then get back to us, if council should have a role, or if we haven't got a role, I'm not sure.
Councillor Mayor, I was on the road safety committee going back a little while, and that was a problem then, getting volunteers to be able to do that work. And obviously it's still a problem, yeah.
They've got advertised the fact they're looking for volunteers. I've never seen it anywhere.
Jack has got a car and they do some work, but I don't know maybe how much they're doing or what they're doing. No, I don't know.
Yeah, we're going to say that there's a new vehicle coming, ready for get used.
Yes, okay.
And again, if we have to resource that, maybe it's someone like a job active where they can actually put someone in as a position on.
Well, Councillor Owens Harris checks it out, and if there's something that we can do to help, well, let us know so we can have a discussion.
Thank you.
Anything else, councillors? If not, we move to the next one, which is Recreation Advisory Committee. That is pretty old because Deb had an unfortunate break. That put her out of action. Now we are going to change, and we will have something to come to us shortly to request a change in the committee. We'll wait till that comes through and we'll deal with that.
That'll come to a workshop, but yes, you proposed changes.
The last one is 13.3, the Circulated Heritage Centre. Is any questions on that one? Queries on it? Move right on. We come to our second lot of public questions, and unless our member from the colleague was going to ask a question, I'm not going to read it all out again. So we're ready to go. So no questions. Come to our motion now. The matters listed below. Please. We close meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. Councillor Blizzard, Councillor Ratland. Put the motion, all those in favour? It's carried. Closure of the meeting. The council resolved by absolute majority to close the meeting.
So moved. Yep.
Councillor Oldacre and Councillor Posky.
Aye.
I'll put the motion, all those in favour?
Aye.
It's carried. Thank you.
No, you're not allowed to put your card over there, Ashley.